This question comes in from our buddy Lawson over there in the United Kingdom. If you could bring back one Giant from 1 year over the past decade to play on this year's team now, who would it be and why? He selects 2011 Hakeem Nicks. If I looked at it, I would probably go back. Can I count 2010, or is that going back too far?
Well, it has to be within the last 10 years?
Yeah.
Is that what he said?
Uh-huh. So I can count 2010?
I would count 2010. I'll let you have that.
So I'm going to count 2010. I'm going to take Osi Umenyiora from 2010. He had 11.5 sacks and 10 forced fumbles that year in 16 games and 20 quarterback hits. So that's the guy I want to bring back, put him on the edge, let him rush the quarterback, and I think he would have probably the biggest impact on this team this year.
I think that's a good one. Could go in a variety of different directions here because there's been a lot of guys that have had an impact.
Maybe a cornerback? Is there a cornerback that you would want to bring in?
Well, I was going to go really under the radar, sort of a spark plug / special teamer, and I was going to bring back 2011 Chase Blackburn. That's what I was going to do.
Seriously?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Listen, you guys always overlook sometimes those key principles to a team that I argue, and when you get that hustle guy or that guy that's going to make those big interceptions in the middle of the field, sometimes that could be the difference between 2 or 3 wins. So I'll go a little bit outside the box. It's an out-of-the-box question anyway.
It is.
So I'm going to give you an out-of-the-box answer.
Okay. No, that's fine. Is there an offensive lineman? I mean, Chris Snee was still pretty good in 2010, but he's a guard, not a tackle. David Deal was getting towards the end at that point.
Here's the other thing, though, that I have to keep in mind when answering a question like this. If you bring in a guy like that, as you're talking about, you're then going to take off a young guy from the field, and then does that impact the development of that player? For example, the reason I'm bringing it up, I could have easily said 2011 Eli Manning. John, Eli Manning's best season was 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to take Daniel Jones off the field.
Yeah,
so
of course.
I'm
That
also
makes sense.
thinking like that, though.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think I haven't given this a ton of thought. I think the wide receivers are good enough. I wouldn't go there.
Yeah. Tight ends are fine. I think you got some depth there.
You could argue JPP's monster year in 2011, right, when he had all those sacks. You could argue that. I wouldn't go with a wide receiver. Maybe Janoris Jenkins' top year, like 2017 Janoris Jenkins. Could you make that argument?
I think that's fair to compliment James Bradbury.
Yeah, I think that's a name
I'll give you that.
Throw out there.
Oh, I got one for you.
Who do you got?
Oh, I got a real good one. Here's another outside the box. I have to look up the specific year, okay? But I know it falls within the decade. How about the year Stevie Brown had all those interceptions at safety? Okay?
That's not bad.
That's who I'm bringing in, okay? Because he could be my third safety. Okay, so I'm not taking McKinney off the field. I'm not taking Peppers. We'll throw Stevie Brown into the mix. He'll get me all those interceptions. How about that?
Yeah, that was Stevie Brown in 2012.
That was 12. Okay.
Yeah.
See, I knew it fell within the decade. I just wasn't sure which year.
I'm trying to think if there was a corner in the early 2010s that would be worth to bring in. I have to go through the rosters.
That's what I'm trying to do, too, because sometimes
Aaron
visually
Ross,
you just need
Corey
to see
Webster,
the names.
Terrell Thomas, I'd have to look at when his best years were. Plug him in at slot corner. I think that's a possibility there, right? I'd have to look at it. That's actually a really interesting question. I'm going to save that one, and we're going to ask that to Datino tomorrow and see if he has a good answer for us. Let's go back to the phones at 973-667-1960. Caller, you're on the air with Schmelk and Meadow. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
What's going on, fellas? This is Sean from Maryland. How are you?
Sean, what's up, man?
Hey, Sean.
Hey, question. My concern is about the offense. Now, I like the moves that we made as far as personnel and the new coaching staff, so on and so forth. But more specifically, Jason Garrett. Now, when he was with the Cowboys, to my understanding, he was calling the plays, and at some point, the Cowboys stopped him from calling plays.
Yeah, he stopped calling plays all the way back 2010, Lance, 2011, something like that. Right? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think it may have been a little bit later than that. I want to say maybe 12 or 13, but you could be right. Maybe it was 12.
Well, either way, it's been a long time since Jason Garrett called plays.
Yeah, I don't remember because that was my team. I really didn't care too much about the Cowboys. But do you guys remember why they stopped him from making play calling? And I just don't remember. And if so, let's say if, God forbid, things weren't to go well and the Giants had to make the same move that the Cowboys did back then, who would replace him as a play caller on the offensive side, considering Joe Judge is a special team guy?
Well, I mean, Garrett's the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
As long as he is employed by the Giants as offensive coordinator, he is going to call the plays. If you want a different play caller, you replace him as offensive coordinator, and then you either promote somebody to the position or you hire somebody new from the outside. So it's not going to be a deal where Garrett's the offensive coordinator, Sean, and he's not calling plays. That goes along with the position. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely understand that. I'm just saying, what if things go south? I just didn't know who on the roster has experience in.
I mean, I think the only other
calling.
guy that could be that has experience being an offensive play caller is probably Derek Dooley, who's the senior offensive assistant. He was an offensive coordinator in college the last 2 years, I think, at Ole Miss, or Mississippi State, maybe one of those two. And then he was also head coach at Tennessee for a while. So he's a guy that could be the play caller. He's the only guy, I think, on the offensive staff.
Well, Freddie Kitchens, too.
Oh, that's a good point.
play caller.
Freddie Kitchens
Yeah.
also has
Freddie
experience
Kitchens.
being a play
Yeah.
caller. Great point, Lance. I forgot about him.
Yeah, and Derek Dooley was at Missouri. You were right.
Missouri,
he was the
okay.
OC and the quarterback's coach at Missouri for each of the last 2 seasons.
Wrong Southern school that starts with
But the right letter.
MISS.
Yes, the
That
right
is
letter.
correct,
yeah.
yes.
And I looked it up. Bill Callahan took over as the Cowboys play caller in 13.
Oh,
So
13.
it was
Okay,
a little
you're
bit
right.
later. That's
It
why I
was a
just
little
wanted
bit
to
later.
clarify that. Now, in terms of your question about why they took away play calling, I think it came down to, and this is a debate that every coach has within himself, is do you want to have all of those roles on your plate, or is it better to just focus on the task at hand, overseeing the team on game day specifically, and having somebody else call plays? So it was more of how best to divvy up the responsibilities in Dallas, more so than necessarily a reflection of Jason Garrett's play calling, because the Cowboys have had a consistent offense for the most part during Garrett's tenure, regardless of who in particular was calling the plays.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with the roster, the roster change that they made in the offseason and draft and stuff like that, I think our offense I think the whole team, to be honest, has a chance of being playoff contenders. It's just a matter of what do we do with the chess pieces that we have. So, in my opinion, this season there's a lot of pressure on the coaching staff. I understand there's new coaches, new schemes. COVID hit. I know there's a lot of reasons, but I think they have a strong chance of making a playoff.
Well, Sean,
I know it's too early
real
to talk
quick,
playoffs,
I don't want to interrupt you. I don't want to put it on the coaches, though, because here's the bottom line for me. These coaches can coach their butts off. But if none of these young cornerbacks step up and are starting caliber NFL players, and you're rolling out a second outside cornerback and a slot cornerback that can't cover anybody, I don't care what scheme you play. I don't care what the coaches do. It's not going to matter. So in the end, it comes down to whether or not the players are good enough to beat the guy they're going up against. You can be helped by the coach. You can be put in a good position by the scheme, all that stuff, and that helps. But in the end, if the player's not good enough, it's not going to matter. So to me, when you look at this year, and we talked about turnovers, you can put that aside for now. If this secondary, which is very young and pretty inexperienced, cannot improve and get better, what the coaches do doesn't matter. It's what we saw last year. People want to kill James Betcher. James Betcher tried to play man-to-man. James Betcher tried to play press. He tried to play off. He tried to play zone. It didn't matter what he tried. None of it worked because the players didn't execute properly. It's true. It's true. So those guys, and they have different guys now, right? You hope, Sam Beal in his third year, he's healthy and gets a chance to play the whole year. You hope Xavier McKinney's an improvement. You hope Julian Love in his second year improves. You hope Darnay Holmes is a rookie, can help you out. James Bradbury's a new outside cornerback. You hope those new players are better, but a lot of them, aside from Bradbury, don't have a lot of experience. So we'll have to wait and see when they get on the field if they can do the job that they have to do for the team to win games.
I agree. In your honest opinion, do you think they're going to keep Baker?
I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. There's so much unknown with that sort of stuff. I wouldn't even want to venture a guess.
Politically correct answer. That's fair. I don't blame you. But
Sean, it's all I got for you, man.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thanks for calling, buddy. Thank you. Look, we just don't know with that stuff. And, it's just there's no point to speculate because it can go a million different ways. But, Lance, to me, look, coaching's important, but in the end, these guys eventually, the players have to make plays on the field.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, John. I think you made a very good point in terms of when we go back to some of the questions we talked about earlier in the show, and do the Giants have an edge because they have new schemes, it still goes back to the players. You could be an extremely creative mind. John, you're going to tell me there weren't seasons when Bill Belichick, who is arguably the greatest coach right now in the NFL, and he had years where the secondary was a mess.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys could not make anything go in their favor, okay? And is that because Bill Belichick all of a sudden forgot how to coach one random year?
Look at last year with the Patriots. How are the Patriots wide receivers last year?
No, not very good.
No, it doesn't matter what. Look, the coach's job is to figure out what a player does best, right? And then ask him to do what he does best as much as you possibly can. Well, if what the player does best still isn't good enough, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
He's got to go out and make the plays. N'Keal Harry was a guy they drafted in the first round. He missed half the season because of injury. They acquired Mohamed Sanu. I mean, there were a lot of movable parts, so I think that played a role too. But clearly, there were guys that they expected to step up who didn't. The tight ends, too. They lose Rob Gronkowski. That's a huge void to fill. The coach is not going to all of a sudden get out his machine and reproduce Rob Gronkowski. He's going to have to coach them up, but the limitations are the limitations of the players. And I think we can't lose sight of that. So you hope that a lot of these young players could take a step up. But once again, it's going to depend on how consistent they are week in and week out, regardless of what the scheme calls for.
Bill Belichick's great. Guess what? If Stephen Gilmore gets hurt and they got to bring in some, fifth-round pick without a lot of experience, guess what? It's not going to be good.
Changes the dynamics of the defense.
Yeah, absolutely. 973-667-1960. Calls are fast and furious today. I love it. Caller, you're on the line. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello.
Yes, you're on the air,
Hey,
sir.
guys.
What's your name?
Jeff from Rhode Island.
Hey,
How
Jeff.
you guys
What's
doing
up, man?
today?
Doing all right.
Doing well.
Yeah, I was just wondering why some of these people are getting excited about thinking the Giants might make it to the playoffs this year. Considering the state of their defense and how that played last year, I wouldn't expect anything like that to happen.
Now, Jeff, here's the thing. You're pointing to the right side of the ball, and we've talked about this, and I just want to reiterate it again.
Yep.
To me, what's going to determine whether or not the Giants make the playoffs is their defense. And I think the offense is going to be fine. The turnovers are obviously going to be a big part of that. I think those will normalize just because of, randomness and kind of regression to the mean. But the defense has to get better. And look, maybe these young guys come out, Jeff, and they all take huge steps. The rookies are great. Graham puts a great scheme together to take advantage of their strengths, and they play really well in that scheme. Is that possible? Sure. Whether it's going to happen, I don't know.
I don't know. It all remains to be seen. And, it's just there's two stats that jumped out at me. I was looking at some stats today about their defense. Number one, the defense gave up 451 points last year. I believe there was only two teams that gave up more than that. Number two was the giveaway takeaway stat.
Oh, yeah.
The Giants were minus 17 in that regard. It's two really awful stats right there.
It's not good.
Terrible.
It's not good.
And that was dead last in the NFL with the Chargers.
And you're right. By the way, the Giants gave up 28.2 points per game. That was the third most in football.
It's got to get better, guys.
Yeah. 100% it has to get better. Look, Jeff, we're with you. Look, we've been saying it all offseason. This is going to come down to pass defense this year. If you can stop the pass and the Giants do a better job at that, because here's the thing, and I talked about this, and I'm going to post it this afternoon on the Giants Huddle podcast. I talked to George Shaharuri, who is one of the data analysts over there. It's a really great conversation. Everyone should go check it out. I'm going to post it right after the show. But the reason, I think I talked about this with Warren Sharp, too, an interview that's already up on the Giants Huddle. The reason pass defense is so important, right, it's twofold. If you get a lead in a game, right, what's the other team going to try and do? They're going to throw the ball to try to come back, okay?
Sure.
So that's number one. Number two, the way teams often get leads is by throwing the football. So they're going to throw the ball to get a lead. Well, you better be able to stop them. So the only time and the most important time when your rush defense becomes really important is when the other team has the lead, they're trying to run the ball to run the clock out, and you're trying to come back, right? So that's not nearly as important as those other two circumstances, at least in my opinion. So you got to be able to stop the pass in this league. With the way these teams are structured now, with all the weapons and the quarterbacks, it's a high-level quarterback league now. If you can't stop the pass, you cannot win football games. It's that simple.
Well, The other thing is, I hope you guys will be able to get into the the training camp in 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it is, because I always enjoyed the training camp coverage, and I hope that happens relatively soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Have a good day.
Appreciate it.
And right now, we just don't know how that timeline is going to play out because little by little, players are getting tested over these next few days, but because of the protocols
the
in
rookies.
place,
So the rookies right now are getting tested, right?
And then the veterans are going to come in, but because of that 4 to 5 day window and you have to have 2 negative tests, it's probably going to push back the time that they're going to even start strength and conditioning, John.
Yeah, strength and conditioning might not be until August 3rd or 4th, right? And then if you have 2 weeks of ramp up or even just 10 days, you're looking at August 15th before we see even an unpadded practice. So, we're looking at another 3 weeks at least, maybe a little bit more, Lance, until we have an actual, unpadded practice. You're talking about a padded practice? You're talking about a month probably before we see that.
Which means it's really only going to be about 2 weeks of padded practices because then you start to look at the calendar and assuming the season starts on time, we're already in September.
And again, this isn't decided. This is all going to be negotiated, but those are some of the timelines that we've seen floating around the internet from reporters that are usually on top of this sort of thing. So, guys, we're going to do our best to get you the information we can. Whatever I'm allowed to watch, I will watch it. I will report back what I'm allowed to report back. Hopefully it's a lot of juicy tidbits of information that we can actually talk about something different. But at this point, to lose original point on the first caller of the show, we just don't know.
One thing, John, before we get into more questions and calls, sure. I just want to piggyback off of your point about the importance of the pass defense.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
And if you look at the Giants' schedule this year, and this goes back to what we were debating earlier about advantage versus disadvantage, well, think about the veteran quarterbacks. Forget the quarterbacks. Just think about the veterans that the Giants are facing this year, that they have to think about slowing down. And one of the youngest facets of the team right now is the secondary. Because with the exception of James Bradbury, and I'll give you Jabril Peppers to a certain degree, we're talking about the bulk of the secondary is 1 to 2 years in the NFL. So you're going to have to deal with Ben Roethlisberger. You're going to have to deal with, I personally think Nick Foles is going to win the Bears starting quarterback job.
I think so, too. I think that's fair.
You could debate that all you want, but that means that the first 2 weeks of the season, John, you're going up against 2 polished veterans. Oh, by the way, 2 guys that also have been on the biggest stage and have helped their teams win Super Bowls. Then you get Jimmy Garoppolo in week 3. Well, Jimmy's been in the league for a long time. Remember, he backed up Tom Brady for several seasons. So it's not as if, he's a young gun all of a sudden getting into the mix. Then you got Jared Goff. Okay, a little bit on the younger side, but still a veteran. Then Dak Prescott. Prescott already has been in the league for 4 years. You may not get a break in terms of your pass defense until week 6, John, when you get Dwayne Haskins, assuming he obviously is still the starter at that time, and Haskins is like Daniel Jones. Then you're going to Carson Wentz. You got Tom Brady following that. Okay, then you get Haskins again, back to Carson Wentz. Then comes the bye, and then here comes maybe break number 2, but by then he's going to have a good 11 games under his belt, Joe Burrow. You get Russell Wilson after that, another polished veteran. Kyler Murray is in the same boat as Daniel Jones and Dwayne Haskins, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. Okay, so a little bit of youth in weeks 14 through 16, and then Dak Prescott again to end week 17. My point is, John, a lot of veteran quarterbacks this secondary is going to be tested against. And that's more of a reason why we keep emphasizing how the defense is going to determine the ceiling of this team.
Yeah, and I go back, like I said, we talked to Warren Sharp about it, and just looking at it overall, he compares, Lance, where these teams rank offensively year to year, right? So last year, for overall offensive efficiency, he had last year's opponents ranked as an aggregate 23rd. He has this year's opponents ranked aggregate as a 15th, for example. Pass efficiency offense. Last year, he had the teams ranked as 26th. This year, he has them ranked as 16th. So it's going to be a bit of a tougher ride for the pass defense this year, and it's tougher for the run defense too, for that matter, but the question was about the pass defense. So to your point, look, with the NFL now, there's a reason Cam Newton was a free agent. It's because a lot of teams have some pretty good quarterbacks. So there are going to be no easy landing spots this year. And this is the point we made, too. At the end of the year, you get a lot of these young guys that are probably going to be improving, right? You get Joe Burrow and Kyler Murray and guys like that, and Lamar Jackson, where, they might be playing better at that time of year. Who knows?